On and off this week I've been looking for an old scarf of mine. It's quite a special one. I haven't worn it in years. And very sadly for today, can't find it anywhere. House moves over 20 years. Somewhere it's travelled away from me. It's my Palestinian keffiyeh. And whilst wearing it might seem a bit of an affectation for some white bloke from Bournemouth, I'd hung on to it, and I wish I was wearing it today. All over the world there are still so many protests about what the state of Israel is doing to Palestine. Palestinians in the Gaza Strip are being blown to pieces with their infrastructure, hospitals and universities and many symbols of their last vestige of autonomy and identity blown to pieces. It's such a targeted, wide-ranging genocide is the only word. I think there's 4 or 5 different definitions of it legally, and this assault in Gaza seems to tick all of them. And of course there are, is it 2 cases in the International Court at The Hague taking Israel to task over genocide, alleging genocide. It's extremely serious. And so it's an extra detail today on International Keffiyeh Day, that it happens to be something very different sounding, the Eurovision Song Contest. I bloody love Eurovision because it's, you know, it's a massive international TV production. And so just from a production point of view, it's kind of mind-boggling. It's also more or less the one thing that Europe sits down together to watch. And I've always loved that since I was a kid. The sort of shared event of it. But in more recent years, especially last sort of decade or so, something else has been becoming obvious about it. Another truth in the complexity and absurdity of an event like this. In amongst all the different facts and truths about the Eurovision Song Contest is this one. It's a symbol of hope, inclusion and love. It is. That's not fake. It's why people love it so. It's absurd and silly. Camp and kitsch, and always had politics, right? It's always had politics. Sometimes maddeningly so. Sometimes very seriously so. In fact, when the Eurovision Song Contest organisers decide to expel Russia from the competition on grounds of principle because of its unprovoked incursion into Ukraine, starting a war that's still raging. I think that only added to the brand and the kudos of this organisation and the event. It added to the love that it's generating, that here is a place of inclusion, here is a place of love. Massive symbol for those of us who've really had to fight to be included in society. But for everybody, that kind of radiates out to a sense of, you know, silly, wonderful joy that has a bit of depth to it, truthfully, it does. So the organisers' flat refusal to ban Israel is jarringly contrasting. There's that technicality they might say, I don't know if they have, that, well, Israel was provoked by the terrorist organisation Hamas. Yes, we know. By this stage, 7 months in, if you don't know what's been going on, if you don't understand the disproportionality of this, and if it hasn't cracked open to you what the political entity of modern Israel is, the sort of twisted grandson of colonialism. If America is the swaggering son of European colonialism, then Israel, it's like it was never really going to embody the phrase never again. It was instead going to provocatively follow a line of violent exceptionalism. And how the hell does that keep Jewish people safe? The fact that it's built on daring to build itself behind the human shields of millions of Jews systematically rounded up and exterminated by the Nazis with the tacit votes of nice middle-class German people in the 30s is all the more vulgar, all the more horrifying. And we use words like horror and horrifying far too easily, but I can't think of anything that's more horrifying than 35,000 people blown to bits systematically in a space that is one big built-up area of population. And today, as I record this, Israel's warning all the now refugees in Rafah in the south to evacuate. To where? Israel's leadership knows full well what it's doing. And, you know, here, all the cloud of evidence I sort of don't want you to watch, and yet do squintingly enough, of the home videos and other bits of evidence gleefully posted by some Israeli people living in Israel, is as darkly disturbing as it gets. Getting kids to taunt the death of Palestinians is exceptionalism with you know, war as its modus operandi. And no nation can be allowed to live that way in a peaceful global order. But what of course it really shows, what it's shown everybody, is that this is the world order. And where it suits everybody to stand against Putin, because he is a psycho far away from any sense of compassion about anything, driven by, I don't know, haunting by myths, not in a position to speak with deep authority, but we all know, right? Israel points, the wind blows the other way for that in its strategic place to America and to Britain. So my home country is still sending arms there. And if Joe Biden was hoping to give an alternative to the psychodrama Lala Cake's utter uncoupling from reality, exploitative fascism that's going to come in with Donald Trump's second term, if that happens, if he was hoping to show young people and everybody an alternative, having done, you know, some really rather interesting looking investments in social fabric of America with some bills that aren't getting talked about much, he then shows that there is no choice for many young people in the way he's just kept supplying arms to Israel and refuses to stop supporting it. He cannot, as such an old guy, get out of his head that Israel's the good guys and the people who wear keffiyehs and have brown skin are the bad guys. I observed that from all the way across the Atlantic. It seems to be something that just cannot undo in his head, and so the arms keep flowing and the children keep getting dismembered by American and British made bombs. The history of the Holocaust is just so written in our brains here in Europe, deeply rightly, but it seems to me anti-Jewish to me to provoke the world into hating your home nation. It's making Jews less safe, and there are so many Jewish people who are standing up vociferously, day in, day out, saying this is not in my name, this is not helping me, this is not right. We stand with the Palestinians. It's about inclusion and compassion, and any systematic attempt to other people and make them collateral for some political gain. It's just such old politics, it will pass. It is all of a piece with all the symptoms of unsustainability, of the climate crisis, of extractivist oil and gas companies completely unable to stop killing everything for profit. It's fatuously dumb, isn't it? Insultingly stupid. Very, very basically, horrifyingly immature. And Netanyahu's hell-bent desire to be, you know, the daddy of Israel in this regard is alienating it as a nation, making it less and less safe, less and less loved and respected. It's a pariah now. And as I say this today, the UN has voted sort of overwhelmingly, I think 143 nations to 30 odd, either voting against or abstaining, to make Palestine a recognised member of the United Nations. I mean, wow, man. Wow. And it comes back to this thing of identity, doesn't it? That, you know, when I know people who are really into the view of sort of, I know one or two people who are, yeah, Israel, they're all out to get us! And the stuff they post is just, they're so scared. And they're so defined by a racist outlook. And I'm not judging them for that, because we all have these different frames, but I just see something driven by division and fear. And we too easily become human shields to this complete bullshit. Naomi Klein, who is herself Jewish, I heard her say in a very recent podcast, Germany in particular is embarrassing everybody with the way it's getting this wrong by still not reading the weather culturally and continuing to support Israel. Naomi Klein put it beautifully, very wisely. She said, it's like Germany learnt a rule and not a lesson. It learnt the rule that, we must back Israel, when in fact it should have learnt the lesson, we shall not practice othering. That's what never again means. So today I'm so disappointed in my favourite wonderful, silly, inclusive music show and the way it's led to snipers on the roofs, like there are snipers on the roofs of college campuses in America, where yet again young people are taking old wankers to school and standing up for what is so obvious to them as an injustice, that it doesn't help Jewish people, it doesn't help Palestinians, and once again Palestinians are thrown under the bus because they're not worth anything strategically, and kindly old Joe Biden is becoming just toxically disappointing in his not getting this and still funding it. Britain is the same post-colonial horror show under these terrible, terrible Tories, and week in, week out, people even in my hometown of Bournemouth, sleepy old, very, 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 almost fundamentally unrevolutionary Bournemouth, people are showing up in significant numbers and actually getting leaders finally to talk to them on the steps of the civic offices. People care all around the world. This has really opened something up, and it's a moment to stand with Palestinians as symbolic of all of us, that we're not worth anything to corrupt leadership. It is corrupt, investing in the way it does. And we must stand just as vociferously against anti-Semitism, what that really means. It doesn't mean not questioning Israel. In fact, the opposite. It means question everybody who wants to divide us and wants to exceptionalise people, because in the end it's the Jews who will suffer yet again. And I can't obviously speak to what it must feel like recurringly to walk around as a Jewish person, but that's been true for so many of us, different groups in different contexts, micromanaging our expectations walking down streets. Too much of our society is like this, and it's all because of the economics. And it doesn't mean that I shouldn't speak out where I can. I feel unable to speak up about so much, very much. I can't make it to every march, and I can't spend myself on it, and it's not right to spend all our efforts on one thing unless we know that's our conviction. But to show up around the edges and say, yes, I'm standing with you in sheer numbers. Yes, you stand in some sort of mix of my values too, even though I'm such a limping pilgrim of better futures. Even me, Mr. Entitlement, having a go. So I'm sitting here in a very summery shirt and not my Palestinian keffiyeh on Keffiyeh Day and saying I'm not going to watch the Eurovision. Just all the joy's taken out of it. They called this completely wrong. Completely wrong. And it's led to a 20-year-old performer being forced to stand on stage in front of a big audience and get booed because she is being made to literally represent what is a genocidal, fascist-looking state in its actions. no 20-year-old should be put in that position. And no young people, same age as that singer, being forced to go and shoot Palestinians. So hopped up on the idea that they're fundamentally under threat that they would rather not risk it and shoot first and execute the orders to bomb hospitals and places of learning and any hope of infrastructure, even though it was already ring-fenced what could get in and what could get out. It's a gross injustice, and Eurovision as a silly, yes, always political thing, yes, just a TV show, yes, funded by very big state broadcasters. No surprises anywhere, and yet, Eurovision, you called this so wrong. You really misread the water, the weather, the tea leaves. We are so disappointed in you for not taking a very nuanced but clear stance on Israel. If you want to play the game of inclusion and love that Eurovision does represent, must represent in an old school media landscape, we need some things bang in the centre of our culture that stand up for more sustainable, inclusive futures. You utterly muffed it. You utterly muffed this one, and you need to put it right, and I know by tonight you won't. So, we called our dearest mates who we often watch this with, and we said, we're taking a feeble stand, and the joy won't be there in watching it tonight, and I'm so disappointed. And I think that those artists who've had the courage to step out, bravo, you did the right thing. I also don't criticise those who, having gone so far down, have to show up and perform. No shame on anybody. It shouldn't be on an individual's shoulders. We're all trying to figure this out, but leaders, Eurovision, you could have reflected back here, because this is the future, understanding the lies that surrounded, in particular, the story of modern Israel. It's got the trauma here for generations to be sorted out. I can't imagine. And it's not my fight, but I'm connected to it because I'm on earth with you. And it affects things that I do love directly, and I have friends there, and I still care about them, distant and inadequate as I am. Just as an earth citizen wanting a better future. What Israel's doing to Palestine in Gaza, and also things increasingly happening in the West Bank, and what it's always been doing since its modern inception. These are things that will have to get worked through generationally, and I'm inadequate to try and describe it, so I'm not trying to describe it. I'm just testifying to me, saying, far away on a beautiful day, the first proper day of summer in the UK showed up, and God, my country people need some sunshine. We're all so worn down by our government and its expression of all these same values economically, and weather that is changing because of those same outputs into the climate that in the UK we haven't fully understood, and yet the floods, and yet the threat of heat domes here, and yet Europe being, is it the fastest heating continent on earth, and so many places around the world that have got devastating expressions of climate changing rapidly. All of it is connected. All of it is the same terrible, literally horrifying values systematically in our brains and in our computer systems and in our way of doing business. And it's got to change. And it is changing. And it will change. And a lot of older people who won't get it will not be part of the future. Sometimes it's the silliest things that can show us the truth, and in this case it's the Eurovision, and how this has broken hearts of many. And so, like a lot of really well-known organised Eurovision parties that often are doing a particular triumphant call and celebration for LGBTQ plus communities in different cities, a lot of them have shut symbolically. Eurovision, you need to hear this. You need to get your shit straight on this. You've really called it wrong. You've really called it wrong. And we should be better. We should be about love. And so, very sadly, I'm not watching tonight, and I haven't watched all week. And I normally spend half the year looking forward to this, so I hope we can be feeling very different about it next year. Love from one limping, inadequate Futures pilgrim to another.